This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. The school year started in a very different way than one Manitoba home family had been hoping for. Instead of watching their 17-year-old son start his first day of university, the family is sitting by the teen's hospital bed, waiting for him to come out of a coma. CBC's Brittany Greenslade has their story.
Devin Raynor just graduated high school, a 17-year-old full of life.
He always has facts. He's just funny as hell. We love him to death.
Now his family is hoping all that love will help him wake up. 11 days ago, Devin was in a serious crash that's left him in a medically induced coma.
I just want my boy to open his eyes and, just I love you, Mom. That's it. That's all I want.
RCMP say he was driving south on the perimeter when he made a left-hand turn at Highway 15. He was struck by a northbound semi. His mom says they heard the sirens from their nearby home. Then RCMP showed up.
We get to the hospital and the whole side of his head, it was just a bloody mess. It was just gross. And he was horrible. He was all ventilated and he couldn't open his eyes.
Devin has a brain bleed and damage, 15 to 20 staples on the side of his head, a collapsed lung, and he's missing some teeth. His mom saw him just hours before the crash as they joked about his lunch.
And we were just sitting there and he's leaving for work. And I says, oh, what, 4 hot dogs? He had 2 hot dogs in Ziplocs each. And I says, only 4 hot dogs? He goes, yeah. He says, I ran out of buns. And I swear that's not going to be the last thing he says to me. I refuse to have that as the last thing.
Devin had gotten his driver's license a month ago and was set to start computer science classes at the University of Manitoba.
He was going to be driving his friends. They were all going to be paying for the gas, and they were all going to go to school together. Now they're visiting him in the hospital instead.
The family has been overwhelmed with support from the community. More than $12,000 has been raised online to help with expenses and what will be a long recovery for Devin.
The village. I refer to it as the village. Everybody always says it takes a village to raise kids, right? To raise kids. The village stepped up.
And that village isn't done. Not only are Devin's friends visiting him every day in hospital, a group of them are pitching in to buy him a new car as a surprise for when he wakes up. Although his mom jokes she won't let him drive it until he's 40. Brittany Greenslade, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Starting next month, students at the Franco-Manitoban School Division will have new rules surrounding their cell phones. The division will no longer allow devices in classrooms. CBC's Matt Humphrey explains.
It's lunchtime at L'Oreal School, one of the only times grade 12 student Kiki Ajavon will be allowed to use his phone.
It's weird. I don't find it amusing or pleasant. It's not efficient either.
If it's class time, the phone needs to go away. That's the call being made by the Francophone School Division, or DSFM. While grades 9 to 12 can use their devices during lunchtime, kindergarten to grade 8 need to leave their phones at home entirely. The fear being students have trouble dialing in to a lesson plan if they're distracted.
There's some times where people are like in class watching soccer games while the teacher are trying to teach. So I can also see why teachers want to take it away, but I think it's too big of a stretch to say that we have to put it in a pocket in front of the classroom or in your locker and not in your pockets.
Superintendent Alain Leberge says the majority of schools in the DSFM already have their own rules around cell phones, and a division-wide ban brings regulation across the board.
All our schools have tablets, they have laptops. So the need to have a cell phone to get to internet and to do some pedagogical work isn't there anymore. And we notice as well that students would miss on learning and then come back after class and said, well, can you tell me, can you re-explain this to me, please? I did not pay attention.
But others don't have hang-ups about the new rules.
Excessive phone usage during class obviously isn't good, because if you're not listening, you're not going to understand. And I've fallen victim to that many times, so I understand. I'm not really that, I don't get distracted easily, but, you know, my phone is always with me, so when I don't have it on me, I feel like I lost it or something, so it kind of gets me worrying, you know. But I can live without it, you know, I'm good.
It's a great idea to me because kids should be focused on classes when they're at school. And after school, they can use their phone. And phone today are like a way they distract kids when they're at school. So to me, I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
If there's an emergency and students need to be contacted, LeBerge says parents and guardians can call the school office, the way it worked for years before cell phones. Matt Humphrey, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The way it worked for years before cell phones. A new Punjabi English bilingual program has started at a Winnipeg school. CBC's Zabina Ahmed takes us there for the first day of class.
And we are going to do a little bit in Punjabi. So I'm going to write one letter here. I want you to tell me what letter it is. What is that?
That's kind of an ABC, but it's different.
Kids at the Amber Trails Community School are learning these Punjabi alphabets, which is equivalent to A, B, C, and D. It is the first school in Manitoba to start the Punjabi bilingual program.
This is E. Okay?
Jashanpreet Brar teaches grade 1 and 2. She says around 95 students have registered to read, write, and speak in Punjabi.
So basic information about the letters, their recognition, the sounds, and once they are familiar with it, we can go further joining two letters together to make words.
The bilingual program switches between English and Punjabi on alternate days. Students will learn social studies, health, and visual arts in both languages.
Seeing like there is kind of like a lack of bond between grandkids and the grandparents. That's only because of the language. But once they know the language, they can interact with their grandparents.
Shikha Bhatia's 5-year-old daughter will start kindergarten at Amber Trails. They moved to Canada from Punjab 10 years ago and mainly speak Punjabi at home.
As every parent, I also want to see my culture alive in my new generations.
It's fun learning Punjabi.
Programs launched this year will include 5 classes, beginning with kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2. The plan is to grow the program up a grade every year. Zabina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 65-year-old woman from Lac du Bonnet died yesterday from injuries she suffered in a boating accident. She and a man of the same age were in a fishing boat heading south on the Winnipeg River Monday when the boat hit a log in the river. RCMP say the woman was thrown backward into the water and hit the propeller. Other boaters helped pull her from the water and took her and the man she was with to the Lac du Bonnet town dock. A Stars Air ambulance flew her to a Winnipeg hospital where she died yesterday. Pemmachikamak Cree Nation is pleading for more government support for health care. The community in Cross Lake says it's struggling with few local health services and a severe shortage of nurses. CBC's Emily Brass has more.
Pemmachikamak Cree Nation says its nursing station is running with less than half of the nurses it needs. That means it often has to close down and offer emergency services only. Chief David Monia says the shortage of health resources in the Cross Lake area is causing people to die about 11 years younger than average. One of the central concerns is diabetes. The First Nation says about a quarter of its members live with the disease, and those who need dialysis have to go to Thompson or Winnipeg for treatment. That comes with huge financial and social costs. Councillor Donnie McKay says he just lost a good friend because of that lack of renal care. He says, like many from his community, his friend chose to forego dialysis so he could be home.
My sister too, same thing, she quit. You know, she just quit and said, no more. I want to go home and be with my family. I want to be with my family even if I go. pass away from this earth.
McKay says it's unthinkable that a community like Cross Lake, with 10,000 people in town and on reserve, doesn't have renal care. There is a brand new health center opening up there next month, but they say there's no government funding for a dialysis machine. The Band Council is already worried that facility will become a white elephant, a brand new building without adequate equipment or enough staff to run it. Emily Brass, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Chief Monia says Indigenous Services Canada reached out after he called a press conference today. He says the agency still would not commit to providing Pemmachikamak with the nursing staff it needs. ISC says it announced a few new incentives for nurses last month to help attract and retain staff, and it will continue to work with the First Nation. A judge has given a 6-year sentence to a man who repeatedly stabbed a server at a Winnipeg restaurant. The unprovoked attack happened at an Olive Garden restaurant in Transcona in June. It left an 18-year-old server with a collapsed lung and neck muscles so weak she now struggles to hold her head up. The young woman confronted her attacker in a victim impact statement before the sentencing, saying she lay awake in bed for weeks after the attack, clutching a knife under her pillow in fear the man might somehow escape custody. Robert Ingram's lawyer says he now suffers, or rather he did at the time, suffer from delusions, and he wanted to be sent to a federal penitentiary. The trial continued today for a correctional officer charged with criminal negligence in the death of an inmate at Headingley Correctional Centre. As the CBC's Stephanie Cram reports, today court heard the cause of death.
Today, court heard from forensic pathologist Dr. Charles Littman. He testified that 45-year-old William Amo had no trace of illicit drugs like methamphetamine in his blood. Littman says the cause of death was a brain injury due to a lack of oxygen and blood flow to the brain. He testified about the way officers restrained Amo. In a video shown to court last week, officers can be seen holding him down in a prone restraint. Amo was held face down on the floor, his arms and legs restrained, and an officer had a knee on his back. Littman testified this type of restraint can asphyxiate a person since it restricts their chest, preventing them from breathing properly. He says in the video, Amo appears to snore, which is a sign of agonal breathing. He says it's breathing that occurs at the end of life. He called it a reflex reaction to the brain being starved of oxygen. In the video, Amo can be seen saying, "I can't breathe," while being restrained by officers. The defense asked Littman how Amo could talk if he was having trouble breathing. The pathologist explained that having trouble breathing is not being out of breath. It is when there's an obstruction to breathing. Littman says that the autopsy concluded that Amo's heart stopped. He also discovered minor external injuries to Amo's body, like scrapes and bruises, but Littman says they did not cause his death. Correctional Officer Robert Jeffrey Morden has pleaded not guilty to charges of criminal negligence causing death and failure to provide the necessities of life in relation to Amo's death. Stephanie Cram, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 47-year-old man faces numerous charges tonight for allegedly starting a fire in his apartment suite. It happened on Hendon Avenue off Roblin Boulevard around 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon. The province says sheriffs were serving that man with an eviction notice when he barricaded himself inside the suite and started a fire. Police say when he tried to escape through a window, the sheriff's officers took him into custody. The man faces weapons and arson charges. Every day of this so far young provincial election campaign, Manitoba Progressive Conservatives have not missed a chance to promise a tax cut. But as CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, there is something missing from the Tory campaign this week.
Another day, another PC tax cut promise. This time, the Tories pledged to relieve seniors of the burden of paying property taxes, at least until they sell their homes.
Once their home is sold, the property taxes would be collected upon that sale. This will save seniors on fixed incomes thousands of dollars and keep their everyday costs down.
The Manitoba PCs didn't dream up this tax deferral plan. Similar programs exist in BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Scott Johnston also promised a $500 tax credit to help people buy walkers, wheelchairs, and other mobility aids.
But there was one thing missing from the PC announcement today: the party leader, Heather Stephenson.
Stephenson was front and center at the first Tory campaign announcement on Tuesday, but let Riel incumbent Rochelle Squires handle a Wednesday announcement and today deferred to Assiniboia's Johnston. Political scientist Roy Scoop says this is a sign of a close race.
I think the Premier is confirming what a lot of us know, that this election is going to be fought in a relatively small number of seats, and she's doing her best to give those candidates an advantage and a little bit of face time with the media.
Another political scientist, Paul Thomas, says Stephenson's low popularity may also be playing a role. NDP leader Wab Kinew offered an even less charitable assessment.
This is a job interview to lead the province of Manitoba. And I believe that if you want the job, you should show up for the interview.
Scott Johnston says Stephenson simply has faith in her candidates.
She has every confidence in her team to be able to deliver messaging, particularly by ministers who are responsible for those portfolios.
Regardless, Stephenson wasn't in Winnipeg today. She toured St. Teresa Point and Garden Hill. She's slated to visit Flin Flon and La Pas on Friday. Bartlett Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The New Democrats made another health care promise today, this time pledging to spend more money to retain nurse practitioners. The head of the Manitoba Nurses Union endorsed that plan, but not the party itself. She said only the NDP is speaking to nurses.
I think it is so encouraging to have a party actually want to talk to frontline nurses and want to hear their issues and their solutions. So I couldn't be happier with the fact that there's going to be collaboration.
And remember, you can watch Manitoba's three main party leaders go head-to-head right here at 6 p.m. September 21st. We're teaming up with CTV and Global to bring you an hour-long commercial-free provincial leaders debate. It will be moderated by Mary Agnes Welch from Probe Research with a question series by a panel of journalists. We'll also bring you live analysis immediately after the debate at 7 p.m. I'll be hosting that. You can watch that on our website and on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. A Winnipeg councillor says the city must be prepared to bear the expense of cleaning up partially demolished properties. City administration was asked to look into a proposal to have the city clean up buildings that are destroyed by fire and then try to recoup that cost through taxes or eventually seizing the property. But a report says the cost of cleanup could exceed the value of the property left behind. Councillor Cindy Gilroy says that shouldn't matter. She points to this mess, this wreckage of an apartment building on Sherbrooke Street. It was torn down after a fire in February of last year and has sat as a pile of rubble ever since. Gilroy wants the city to create a fund to clean up partially demolished buildings. She hopes the Community Services Committee will agree when it meets next week. And meteorologist John Sauter joins us now. I'm seeing clouds moving in up ahead.
Yeah, it's been a nice sunny day, but last couple of days now I've been hinting at this chance of a shower on Thursday evening, and I have that on radar. It's just to the west of us right now. It's a frontal system that is connected to a low across the north. So we've seen some showers today through areas like Thompson and the northwest, and now the cloud you see here is giving up some rain, maybe another 5 to 10 millimeters tonight across areas like Gillam and Shamattawa. Well, this is the frontal system that is connected to all of that, and it is starting to move toward the Red River Valley. So clouds are moving over Winnipeg now. We've had a few showers in the Portage area up through the southern Interlake. But yes, this won't be long-lived, but it'll move on through in the early evening here. And I did check for lightning. None of this really has any lightning at all. Earlier today, I did see some, but closer to the Saskatchewan border. So some scattered showers through the evening. It'll move on through probably by about midnight. We're not getting any wind gusts now. The winds have shifted and are shifting around to the north behind this frontal system. We're now at 21. We did reach my forecast high of 22. Here's a look at futurecast as the system moves on through. Even at 10 o'clock, the forecast model kind of keeps things around, developing in a little bit behind the front, but in the overnight period, this moves right off into northwestern Ontario. In the morning, may see some showers around Kenora, but sunshine here across southern Manitoba and across most of the north as well. The northeast will still see some showers through into the afternoon, but it'll be a sunny day here tomorrow, not quite as windy, and the winds will have shifted to the north, and then it's a sun-cloud mix as we head on into Saturday and the rest of the weekend. Forecast amounts, these are additional amounts of rain from now over the next 24 hours, another 10 possible in the Gillam area, another 5 around Island Lake. And here in southern Manitoba, just meager amounts, 1 to 3 millimeters is all we're looking at. Looking at temperatures in the future too, and we've got the milder air underneath a ridge, which now includes southeastern Manitoba. And then as we get into Sunday, it's a little bit of a cooling trend. This is really getting us back to seasonal. And then this big upper ridge tries to push to the east as we head through next week. And you'll see that a little later in the 7-day forecast, what that will do to numbers by this time next week. 10 degrees tonight, a few evening showers, and then just clearing overnight. Sunny, breezy in the morning. The winds actually drop off through the day on Friday, and we'll get to a high of 23 in the sunshine. So it'll feel quite comfortable out there. And in the long range, these are the numbers for the weekend and on into early next week. And right now, our normal high is 20 degrees. By this time on Monday, it'll be 19, so above seasonal through into next week. And I'll have that 7-day forecast for you shortly.
Thanks very much, John.
You're welcome.
Coming up, close encounters at sea. A Royal Canadian Navy frigate has had at least 3 run-ins with Chinese ships in international waters. A CBC News team is embedded on board. We'll bring you an exclusive look at the situation when we return. We have a CBC News exclusive for you now from the East China Sea. A Royal Canadian Navy frigate has had at least 3 encounters at sea with Chinese ships. The most significant one was during an exercise in international waters with Japanese and American allies. The incidents were peaceful, but they do hint at the ongoing tensions in these contested waters. David Common is part of our CBC News team embedded on board HMCS Ottawa.
It is the type of close encounter that we rarely hear about and are only seeing because we have exclusive access here on board the Canadian warship HMCS Ottawa. And this ship was meeting with allied nations, the Japanese and the Americans, as part of a military exercise in the East China Sea when a Chinese warship suddenly showed up very, very close. In these instances, there is, of course, the risk of a collision, but also an opportunity to gaze at an adversary.
We're not even in the Taiwan Strait. We're not in contested waters, and there's a Chinese warship right there.
They're operating near the waters, their own waters, and we're just operating in this open ocean. They're as curious about, I think, our behavior as we are of theirs.
This is Chinese warship 161, over.
The Chinese warship stayed in the area for the duration of that exercise, often very close to American, Japanese, or to this vessel, the Canadian vessel, calling out on the radio. It was a professional encounter, safe, although there have been instances at sea, particularly between the Chinese and the Americans, that are not always safe. Instances where the Chinese have cut off American warships traversing areas that are in contested waters. Now, China's Navy is now the world's largest by the number of vessels, and it is increasingly assertive on the high seas, particularly around its neighbors, showing up in areas like this. And it is part of a changing China, a changing region in many ways. The Canadian ship, part of a multilateral exercise to try to push that these seas should be open and free to all nations to navigate, even as China makes claims on some of the waters now considered international. David Common, CBC News, on board HMCS Ottawa in the East China Sea.
The federal government has named a Quebec judge to head a public inquiry into foreign interference in Canadian elections. She will preside over the independent investigation looking at alleged meddling in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections. CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian has the latest from Ottawa.
After months of putting it off, the government's agreed to a public inquiry into foreign interference.
We have arrived with the full support of the opposition at the best person to lead this inquiry.
That will be Quebec Court of Appeal Judge Marie-Josée Hogg, tasked with looking into foreign interference by China, Russia, and other state and non-state actors during the federal elections in 2019 and 2021.
We arrived not at a consensus, but at a unanimous agreement on all of those details.
But the opposition had been asking for a public inquiry since last winter, following multiple news stories leaning on anonymous national security sources and leaked documents. They alleged Beijing attempted to interfere in the last 2 federal elections to favor victories for Liberal MPs over the return of Conservatives to power. The Liberals punted the decision over an inquiry to Special Rapporteur David Johnston, who wound up resigning after recommending against one.
Justin Trudeau has tried to do everything to avoid this.
The Conservatives had been leading the charge against Johnston, accusing him of being too close to Justin Trudeau's family. They're showing more cooperation for now.
We accept the nomination of Justice Hogg, and we will continue to not just push for the government to be open and transparent and provide all the documents and waive all the cabinet confidences that may be required.
National security experts say she'll have her work cut out for her.
The mandate being given to the commissioner is a pretty broad one, and I hope that the first thing that she does is to prepare a fairly comprehensive inventory of what's happened, not only directly on the elections, but on what's happened between elections.
All this with tight timelines. Hogg is expected to produce an interim report by the end of next February and a final one by the end of next year. She officially starts her job in less than 2 weeks. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Conservative Party members are gathered in Quebec City for a 3-day policy convention. It comes as the federal Conservatives see a boost in poll numbers over the summer. Party leader Pierre Poilievre says he's focused on affordability and inflation. But some members of his party have other issues in mind. CBC's Kate McKenna reports.
Pierre Poilievre, le prochain Premier ministre du Canada.
Pierre Poilievre received a warm welcome from a united caucus.
Conservatives will get back to the common sense of the common people.
The convention kicks off this evening, and the mood among the party faithful is good.
The response we're getting from voters under Pierre Poilievre's leadership, and which is such an exciting weekend for us, so we're very excited to be here.
It's always great to connect with constituents from across the country and to hear what they have to say.
This summer, Poilievre hammered the government on the cost of living. He's also seen a bump in polls, though Conservatives were quick to brush that off.
We don't look at polls, we just keep working.
But while his focus has been on pocketbook issues, his party wants to talk about social issues. Some proposed resolutions target vaccine mandates and diversity training. One proposes banning puberty blockers and surgery for transgender kids under 18.
I respect the rights and dignity of all Canadians, including members of the community. I also respect and have faith in the capacity of the Conservative Party membership to have respectful and compassionate debates.
Whatever resolutions do pass, they're not binding, but they could force Pierre Poilievre to walk a tightrope between keeping the party's base happy and appealing to a broader Canadian public. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Quebec City.
RCMP and BC are the latest authorities in Canada to open investigations related to Kenneth Law. The Ontario man is already accused of selling a deadly substance online to at-risk individuals. So far, police around the world have linked him to more than 100 deaths, including one in Ontario. CBC News spoke with the grieving mother of a Canadian teen who was allegedly sold poison. Thomas Daigle has the story.
Kim Prosser has spent hours on the shores of Lake Erie, trying to heal since the death of her son Ashton last March. He was a month away from his 20th birthday.
It was like all of this potential it's just gone.
She's the first parent to speak publicly about a loved one's suicide that prosecutors blame on Kenneth Law. Accused of selling a potentially lethal substance online, Law is facing 14 charges of counseling or aiding suicide in Ontario. Kim suspects Ashton found a pro-suicide forum that led him to Law, when what her son really needed was help.
We're not doing enough. There isn't support for everyone who's struggling in mental health.
She says Ashton's mental health declined when his high school classes went virtual early in the pandemic. Around the world, families are speaking of their late loved one's struggles, with Law suspected of links to more than 110 deaths in multiple countries.
He's destroyed lives, so many lives.
Imogen Nunn was known to her TikTok followers as Deaf Immy, raising awareness about the deaf community and mental health until she took her own life this year.
It was really difficult to get access to deaf mental health services.
Law was arrested near Toronto in May. Now police in BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan all say they're investigating. Law sent 160 packages across Canada, allegedly marketing products to vulnerable clients.
To see someone who might be undermining that by promoting or talking about suicide as a way to feel better is really hard to watch.
As for Prosser, she plans to start a foundation in her son's memory, knowing those who need support aren't always getting it. Those tattoos symbolize her family and were drawn by Ashton, a part of him she'll keep forever. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
Help is available if you or someone you know is struggling. You can call Talk Suicide Canada at the number on your screen. You'll find it on their website. It's 1-833-456-4566. You can text 45645 between 5 p.m. or make that actually 3 p.m. and 11 p.m. our time. Their gargantuan return to Yellowknife goes on, and for those coming back, it's a road filled with challenges. CBC's Aaron Collins explains.
Thousands of Yellowknifers continue to trickle back into the city, weeks on the road coming to an end for many residents forced to evacuate the capital. Now, the first stop for many returning to the city, the grocery store. Filling fridges and cupboards key for most. Local stores deemed essential services working hard to get their shelves stocked.
If you can't find something today, I'm sure we'll have it tomorrow or the next day.
Officials say most of the other key services in the city have been restored. Water and power is flowing. The city's airport and hospital are also up and running, although there are some limitations there.
Our ICU is closed, our pediatrics unit is closed, and I think of interest for many people, our labor and delivery unit remains closed.
While residents return to the capital, dozens of fires continue to burn across the territory, preventing other people from heading home.
And our singular objective is to help those folks get home safe and reduce that wildfire risk.
The hope is that a plan to return people to the town of Hay River could be released soon. When that plan will actually come into effect, well, that's still unknown. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Coming up, a mother warns other Canadians to be on alert for insect-borne infections. Her young son became severely ill. What climate change could mean for these illnesses after the break. Canada is experiencing shorter and less severe winters due to climate change. Some people enjoy the warmer weather, but so do many bugs that carry infectious diseases. Now, a Toronto mother is warning Canadians to be on alert for insect-borne infections after her young son fell severely ill. Lauren Pelly has the story.
He's right here. Hey, buddy. It's okay.
Catherine McKissick's son Cameron spent a month in a Toronto hospital suffering from dangerous brain inflammation. Lab reports later showed the 6-year-old was infected with Jamestown Canyon virus. It's a rare but rising threat spread across North America by mosquitoes, and one his mom had never heard of.
How do you protect your child from a mosquito?
The family didn't travel this summer, so she assumes her son was bitten right in their own community. McKissock now worries more Canadians could be at risk.
I'm really hoping that they start testing for these things and they start watching for it and studying it a little bit closer.
We actually don't really know how much of these infections are here, and there certainly is a major knowledge gap.
This doctor warns limited testing and awareness means many cases of insect-transmitted infections could be underreported, even though climate change is fueling their spread.
We're seeing, shorter winters that aren't as cold, and basically the expansion of insects that can transmit these infections.
West Nile and Lyme disease are two of the big ones. Once rare in Canada, thousands of cases have been reported in recent years. Surveillance is also ramping up for other diseases. Ontario just began tracking 3 more tick pathogens this summer, all of which can make humans sick. But the province didn't provide any data. CBC News reached out to every regional health unit and found there could be dozens of possible cases already under investigation.
Of course, it starts out that way, and then, what it'll look like 5 years from now, we can only imagine.
Other leg. McKissick's family now uses bug spray, one of the few tools she has to try and keep her kids safe. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Oshawa, Ontario.
And speaking of climate change, a Canadian glacier is heading rapidly to oblivion, the Pato glaciers in the Rockies. In 1968, the UN selected it for scientific monitoring. 2 years ago, an estimated 70% was gone. And the retreat since then has been stunning. The CBC's Dan McGarvey has the story.
A team of researchers from the University of Saskatchewan takes to the skies over Banff National Park, high above remote mountain tops and pristine lakes, to glaciers and ice fields, and one that's disappearing faster than even they expected.
Well, dramatic change since last year, which itself had been dramatic change from the year before. This is the final end of our ice age. It's happening right now in our lifetimes.
For decades, Pato Glacier's been a global reference point for scientists who measure the ice's thickness and its retreat. They say this year is on track to be one of the worst they've seen, adding to an already historic melt-off in 2021.
Normally the glacier would retreat 20 to 30 meters per year. It retreated almost 300 meters in 1 year after that. It's very challenging to see it disappear like this.
And then add 360 millimeters.
There's now a snowball effect of factors that could see this glacier and others disappear in our lifetimes.
Pato Glacier would usually have fresh snow on it at this time of year, but it's already melted, and without that fresh snow, it can't make the ice it needs to survive.
It gets into this death spiral of when we have this kind of heat, the heat itself melting things, and then the soot from the fire darkening the glacier, causing it to melt faster.
Other scientists who also study the glacier say that means it's getting much harder to monitor as it melts and collapses.
It's getting more and more difficult to access the glacier to do our field work. We're also seeing new crevasses open up in new places, as well as holes and parts of the glacier actually falling apart.
Eventually, scientists will move on from Pato to study glaciers that aren't melting as quickly, leaving this landscape to change forever. Dan McGarvey, CBC News, Banff, Alberta.
John Sauter joins us now. And of course, climate change heats up ocean water and makes hurricanes stronger.
Stronger, and we're tracking one now. Yesterday at this time, I was talking about Hurricane Lee. Now, it's not threatening any land right now. It's well out at sea, but it's gone from a Category 1 to a Category 4 in just 24 hours. Here's a look at the position of that hurricane. You can see it well off to the east of the Caribbean right now. It is packing winds now that are quite impressive, around 240 kilometers per hour. So the conditions of Lee, well, 215 right now as a Category 4, but in the next 24 hours, it becomes a Category 5 with winds of 270 kilometers per hour. This will stay north of the Caribbean and drop to a Category 4 hurricane on the weekend, but may gain strength again as it moves toward the U.S. And the long-range models have this moving and staying off the coast, but perhaps in a week's time affecting maritime Canada. So we'll watch that very, very carefully. Still 22 downtown, lots of 21s here, a 16 up around the lakes, 18 in Selkirk, 19 now in Brandon, but 26 degrees right now in Melita. Still summer in the southwest corner of the province. Up to the north, we've got 13s in Thompson, Norway House, 19s out to the west, where we had some showers earlier and where it's raining now out to the northeast. Temperatures are a little bit cooler. All right, forecast conditions for tonight, fairly clear for southern Manitoba and northwestern Ontario. Down to 12 in Kenora, 8 in Fort Francis. We'll see a low of 10 here in the Winnipeg area, and we have that chance of evening showers for many of the regions, but then that will end and it'll just be a clear to partly cloudy sky overnight. Also a chance of some evening showers left over in Dauphin and Brandon, certainly Portage La Prairie and down through Morden and Winkler. Pretty soon Brandon's going to be on the backside of that frontal system. Some patchy fog tonight in the west. Evening showers in Thompson, showers in Churchill, and 5 to 10 millimeters of rain in Gillam and surrounding areas. And then tomorrow it tapers off to showers through the day, although still a little wet in the Churchill area. 20s in the west, 18 around Thompson, 20 in Norway House with lots of sunshine, and it'll be a fairly sunny day here across southern Manitoba. 23 tomorrow in Brandon, 23 here in the Winnipeg area. Steinbach at 22. Again, lots of sunshine. Some areas seeing a little bit of a partly cloudy sky, and we'll see a sun-cloud mix in low 20s in northwestern Ontario as well.
Thanks, John.
You bet.
Back to school means spending lots of time indoors with other people. After the break, we speak with a pediatrician for advice on how to handle the upcoming cold and flu season. And what about COVID? We'll ask after the break. With kids back in school, you know cold and flu season can't be far away. And what about COVID-19? What should we be doing to keep each other healthy? I got advice from pediatrician Dr. William Lee. Dr. Lee, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What are you expecting this fall that could be a risk for people at school?
Yeah, so as kids are going back to school, we're anticipating that there will be a typical cough and cold and flu wave in the fall. The past few years have been a bit atypical considering we've had a lot of COVID infection, but we anticipate that prior to the pandemic, just like prior to the pandemic, we're going to have a number of different respiratory viruses in the fall, but this year alongside with COVID as well.
Now, in the perhaps pre-pandemic days, with a cough and a cold, you might have just gone to school anyway. What is your advice now?
Yeah, so I think the advice is to be a bit cautious. So certainly if you're sick, not feeling well with a fever, I would stay home. I would make sure that you have good hand hygiene. You want to try to limit the spread of that to those around you, and especially going to school, that is a risk that could spread it to others. And there's going to be some kids at school who are more at risk of developing severe complications of these infections as well. So we want to help protect them.
So again, all that stuff we learned during the pandemic about good hand hygiene, wearing a mask, using your elbow if you've got a cough and not your hand. We've got to remember all those basics. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think a lot of that still apply. Certainly, those are good fundamentals that are important to make sure that we decrease the spread. The use of a mask is an option for you if you would like. And then also just to get vaccinated as well, to get the fall flu vaccine, and then to be up to date with your COVID vaccines as well.
Can you remind us of the ages where people should be vaccinated?
Sure. So anyone 6 months and above are eligible to get their COVID vaccines. We recommend that everyone 5 years and above should get their primary series. And if it's been at least 6 months or from your last vaccine, or 6 months from your COVID infection, if you've had one, then you're eligible for a booster vaccine as well.
Okay. Where are we in the development of, say, a new vaccine that perhaps would you recommend that we wait for the next round of vaccines? Or who should get vaccinated now?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are anticipating that there will be new monovalent vaccines available as the primary series shortly. They're waiting approval from Health Canada, and so we anticipate that they should be available shortly. So I would say that if you're at really high risk, and that would be kids that are really heavily immunosuppressed, undergoing chemotherapeutics, for example, or those that are anticipating prolonged travel upcoming, that you should get your vaccine now. But for those that are able to wait a little bit, I would anticipate that we'll have some new vaccines as well upcoming.
Dr. William Lee, thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, thanks so much.
John Sauter's back with your 7-day forecast when we return. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News.
Here is a quick look at the radar. Some showers north of Winnipeg, and some of these could move through the Winnipeg area as we head into the evening hours. Big football game this weekend, Bombers versus Rough Riders. It's the Banjo Bowl, and on Saturday, kickoff time is 3 o'clock. Should be around 20 degrees at halftime. No rain. It'll be very, very sunny, and a mix of sun and cloud really through the weekend and through next week as well, where temperatures by midweek will climb to the 23 or 24 degree range, and we have dry weather for the next week as well. South Korean researchers have developed an advanced pilot robot, aka PiBot.
It uses artificial intelligence to scan flight manuals so it can fly planes. Here is your daily lift. Researchers say PiBot, there he is now, can do much more than a traditional autopilot system. In emergency situations, it responds without panic. PiBot has successfully used a flight simulator, and the team is now working to conduct tests in real airplanes. They also say PiBot could be used to drive cars, trains, pilot submarines.
As a former pilot, I don't know.
I don't know.
More research.
Could it land the Gimli glider? I think not. Good night.